بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله رب العالمين، والصلاة والسلام على أشرف الأنبياء والمرسلين سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وأصحابه وبارك وسلم تسليما كثيرا كثيرا. أما بعد، السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. I hope everybody can hear. I think it shows that it's sorry, please give me a moment here. I'm trying to see if the audio is working. So I think it's working, inshallah. Okay, so Bismillah, Alhamdulillah, wassalatu wassalamu ala Rasulillah. Last week and the class prior to that was on Yusuf alayhi salam and the story of Yusuf alayhi salam from the surah Yusuf, and we shall continue with that inshaAllah ta'ala. And for those of us joining us for the first time, the previous two videos, we agreed that we were going to recite the Arabic from the Quran and then read the English translation of that part, and then we will discuss from those verses that we read and take out some reflections from there, inshallah ta'ala. So that's what we're going to do. And we left off on the verse 19. So we'll recite the Arabic and then we'll do the translation, inshallah ta'ala. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم وجاءت سيارة فأرسلوا واردهم فأدلى دلوه قال يا بشرى هذا غلام وأسروه بضاعة والله عليم بما يعملون وشروه بثمن بخس دراهم معدودة وكانوا فيه من الزاهدين وقال الذي اشتراه من مصر لامرأته أكرمي مثواه عسى أن ينفعنا أو نتخذه ولدا وكذلك مكنا ليوسف في الأرض ولنعلمه من تأويل الأحاديث والله غالب على أمره ولكن أكثر الناس لا يعلمون ولما بلغ أشده آتيناه حكما وعلما وكذلك نجزي المحسنين وراودته التي هو في بيتها عن نفسه وغلقت الأبواب وقالت هيت لك قال معاذ الله إنه ربي أحسن مثواي إنه لا يفلح الظالمون ولقد همت به وهم بها لولا أن رأى برهان ربه كذلك لنصرف عنه السوء والفحشاء إنه من عبادنا المخلصين واستبق الباب وقدت قميصه من دبر وألف يا سيدها لدى الباب قالت ما جزاء من أراد بأهلك سوءا إلا أن يسجن أو عذاب أليم قال هي راودتني عن نفسي وشهد شاهد من أهلها إن كان قميصه قد من قبل فصدقت وهو من الكاذبين وإن كان قميصه قد من دبر فكذبت وهو من الصادقين فلما رأى قميصه قد من دبر قال إنه من كيدكن إن كيدكن عظيم يوسف أعرض عن هذا واستغفري لذنبك إنك كنت من الخاطئين. Now, inshallah, we're going to recite the translation. Now there came a caravan, and they sent forth their water scout. So he let down his bucket into the well. He said, "O glad tidings, here is a boy." And they hid him as merchandise. Yet God was all aware of all that they were doing. Thus they sold him for a paltry price, a number of coins, for they were disinclined toward him. The man from Egypt who bought him said to his wife, "Tend graciously to his dwelling. He may benefit us, or we may take him as a son." And thus did we establish Yusuf in the land, that we might teach him of the interpretation of events that dreams foretell. For God prevails in his affairs, but most people do not comprehend this. So when he had reached full maturity, we gave him prophetic wisdom and knowledge of God, and thus do we reward those who excel in doing good. Now she in whose house he was serving solicited him to have him. Thus she bolted the doors and said, "Here I am for you." He said, "God is my refuge. I will not betray the high minister. Indeed, he is my Lord, who has made excellent my dwelling, and never shall the ungodly wrongdoers succeed." And very truly, she had firmly set her desire on him, and he too would have set his desire on her, had he not seen a guiding proof from his Lord. In this way did we turn evil and lewdness away from him. Indeed, he was one of our sincere elect servants. So they both raced for the door, and she rent his shirt from behind, but they encountered her Lord at the door. At once she said to him, "What shall be the recompense for one who desired evil with your wife, but that he be imprisoned or suffer a most painful torment?" Yusuf said, "It was she who solicited me to have me." Then a witness from her own family came forth and testified, "If his shirt is rent from the front, then she has spoken the truth, and he is of the liars. But if his shirt is rent from behind, then she has lied, and he is of the truthful." Thus when the high minister saw that his shirt was rent from behind, he said to her, "This is indeed of your womanly cunning. Indeed, your cunning is great." Yusuf, the high minister, said, "Turn aside from this. And as for you," he said to his wife, "ask forgiveness for your sin. Indeed, you have been one of the exceedingly sinful." So, last week we stopped at the point where Yusuf alayhi salam, his brothers, they had thrown him into the well, and as he was throwing him into the well, they saw that Yusuf alayhi salam was in shock, and he was begging them to save them. But obviously, they weren't budging, and they said, "You should call upon those stars that you saw that were bowing down to you in your dream." And so that's what they said, and then he fell into the well. And it was at this time that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala inspired him that he will relay to the brothers all that they did. And once he's in the well, now imagine what he's going through. He's a young child, 7, 8 years old, around that age, and he's in a dark pit of a well, all by himself. And this is obviously, imagine the night that he's going through. There's nobody around him. It's pitch dark. There's probably animals the sounds of animals he's hearing, probably wolves, the howling. He can hear all these things, and he, as a child, any child would be terrified in this state. And so this is what Yusuf alayhi salam is experiencing. Now, the day prior, he was in complete security with his father at home, sleeping on like everybody else. But today, it's a completely different situation. He's in the bottom of a pit, and his brothers would have gone back to their homes, and they would be sleeping, and they would be they would have ate a full meal at nighttime, and they would be in complete comfort of their homes. But here is Yusuf alayhi salam, their brother. He's in a completely different situation. So what happens is, as we read, there's a caravan that's passing by in that area, and they one of them is sent to fetch some water because they're thirsty. And he throws the bucket into the well, and as he's pulling it up, he notices that it's very, very heavy, or more heavy than usual. And as he pulls the bucket up, he finds a boy. And then it's such a good news for him that they find a young boy, because back in those days, slavery was a common thing. It wasn't something that was taboo. It wasn't something that was looked as a negative thing. It was common to sell, buy and sell, slaves. And so to them, this was a fortune that they're going to take this child, and they're perhaps going to sell this boy in the land they go back to, and make some money out of it. So out of him. Now, what's very interesting is that, if you think about a 7-year-old child that would have spent the entire night in terror inside this well, then what do you think this child would have said or done as the bucket is lifted up? We would have probably imagined this child to be screaming for help and letting them know what happened. Their brothers, this is what my brothers did to me. But none of that. Yusuf alayhi salam says nothing. And this, right from the get-go, this shows that Yusuf alayhi salam is an extremely wise child, and that wisdom was something that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala bestowed upon him. And right from the verse prior, from last week's lesson, we know that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala did inspire him to say that you will narrate everything that has transpired between you and your brothers. And so in that was also consolation, in that was also comfort from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that everything will be okay. It was uncomfortable, the situation, but he knew that Allah was with him. And if you take when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala decides some good for a person, then no matter what the world does, then it doesn't matter. That person will attain success at the end of the day. So here, no matter what the brothers are trying to do, their idea was, let's throw him into a well and he'll just probably disappear. Somebody will pick him up, and then he'll just he'll become something insignificant. This Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala set it up in such a way that it was this caravan that's going to take this child. Why? Because this caravan is now going to take him back to Egypt. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has written that this is one of the things that is supposed to happen in order for him to achieve of the good that he's supposed to gain, of prophethood and of all that goodness. So they take him back, and these people, they just look at this child as a child. They're looking at it as an opportunity to make some money, but that's about it, right? But when they get to Egypt, the high minister, the person inside the castle, this high minister in the castle, he notices something special about Yusuf, and this is something that he probably had of intuition that he saw. Sometimes you can tell when you just look at even a child or a young person, just the way they behave and just the way they carry themselves and just the way they talk, even though they haven't achieved much in life yet because of their young age, you can almost kind of guarantee that this child is going somewhere, has huge potential, and that's just based on certain things, that the way they speak, the way they carry themselves. So this high minister must have seen something in this young child, Yusuf alayhi salam, and so he decides he's going to buy Yusuf alayhi salam. And so another thing here is, so Allah makes this happen, that he's thrown into the well, and Allah makes this happen that this caravan is going to stop at this spot in order to get water, and then they carry this child back to Egypt where they're supposed to go, so that this child goes into the hands of this particular high minister, this individual. So it could have been anybody in Egypt. It could have been anybody that picked him up from that well. But these were precise decisions of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that was taking place. And like I said, when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala decides something is going to happen, then no matter what anybody plans, then it's meaningless in front of, or it's weak and insignificant in front of the plans of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And this is not something that might be seen immediately, right? As the brothers, to them, they were successful. They got rid of the brother that they wanted to get rid of, and to them, it's done. Everything's over. But Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has a much greater plan in all this, in the workings. So now what happens? He reaches full maturity. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala does give him prophethood while he is in Egypt. And so Yusuf alayhi salam is knowledgeable of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And he becomes aware of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's greatness to a greater degree than he would have known just being in the company of his father. Obviously, that company that he was in of prophethood and knowledge would have given him that head start in knowing about Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. But here Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is especially granting him something of prophethood while he's in Egypt as well. So now he's growing up. He's become a young man, and he's mature. That same woman that the high minister who told his his wife, take care of this child. Perhaps we can make use of him, or we can even adopt him as a son, because he looks like somebody that's really useful for us. But now he's much older, and the high minister's wife is inclined towards him, and she wants him in the wrong way. And so what she does is she locks the door with him, Yusuf alayhi salam, in the same room, and calls him to the wrong. And so now, what does Yusuf alayhi salam say? He says, "Ma'ad Allah, Allah is my refuge." Right? And then he says, "I will not betray the high minister." So the word in the words in the Quran is "Innahu Rabbi ahsana mathway." So first he says, "Qala ma'ad Allah," I seek refuge in Allah, or Allah is my refuge. And then he says, "Innahu Rabbi ahsana mathway," in reference to the high minister who bought him, right, and took care of him. He says, indeed, he's my master, like in the sense that he bought him and he's taking care of him, who has made excellent my dwelling. Now, where was he? His brothers threw him into the well, and then this man who he never knew is taking care of him. And he's so grateful to that, grateful to this high minister, that he's taken care of him all this time. And so this loyalty that he has, it doesn't allow him to cross any bounds in regards to his master. So he says, "Indeed, he is my master who has made excellent my dwelling, and never shall the ungodly wrongdoers succeed." So, no matter how religious we are and how connected a person may be to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, an important point to remember here is also the thankfulness that we should have towards the creation as well. So Yusuf alayhi salam is a prophet. His connection is to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, but he also highlights here that, hold on, I'm in being bound to Allah, in being obedient to Allah, I also have obligations to creation. Because the Prophet ﷺ also says in the hadith, "Man lam yashkurin nas lam yashkurillah." Whoever is not thankful of the creation, of the people, is not thankful to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So here he's showing how thankful he is, not that he would have done the wrong if he had no obligations towards his master, but to highlight the importance, on top of the obligations to Allah, that I have a specific kind of duty to not to cross any bounds with this high minister, because he's done so much good to me. And then he goes on to say that on the ungodly, the dhalimun, will never be successful. So, but then what comes up? وَلَقَدْ هَمَّتْ بِهِ وَهَمَّ بِهَا. And very truly, she had firmly set her desire on him. She wanted to do the wrong with him. And then وَهَمَّ بِهَا. And he too inclined toward her. Now, this in the tafasir, they go in depth into this. Yes, she firmly desired him, but did Yusuf alayhi salam have any sort of inclination to her as well? Many of the scholars would say that he would have inclined, as depending on how you read it. If you say وَهَمَّ بِهَا لَوْلَا أَرَّأَ بُرْهَانَ رَبِّي, he would have inclined to her as well if he had not seen a proof from his Lord at that time. Something was shown to him. But some other scholars have also said, right, like Mufti Shafi Uthmani, he says in his Ma'rif al-Quran, that it is also possible that he did have an inclination, but this inclination was a natural response. Like if a person is hungry, that feeling of hunger, that's a natural response. When a person is thirsty, that feeling of thirst, that's a natural response. But just like when you're fasting and you're thirsty, there's no way you're going to pick up that glass of water and drink it, nor is there any way of you picking up a plate of food and eating it. Something similar to this was the inner workings of within Yusuf alayhi salam. But this also shows it increases his status in that way, that he was a human being and he would have experienced, as any other young youth would have experienced, yet because of the fear of Allah and love of Allah and the loyalty he has to his master, there was no way that he was going to even consider it. Just like we wouldn't even consider drinking, like I said, a glass of water in the month of Ramadan, though the thirst would have existed. So this human characteristic that we see here is important for us to look in, to be connected to, because when we read the stories of prophets and we how do we connect with these lives? They're humans just like us, but how do we deal with what they dealt? How do we deal with our life circumstances and our challenges the way that the prophets did? And so when this happened, what does Yusuf alayhi salam do? He refuses, because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala shows him a sign, and that sign gives him strength, further strength to stay away. In this way, and then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, كَذَلِكَ لِنَصْرِفَ عَنْهُ السُّوءَ وَالْفَحْشَاءَ إِنَّهُ مِنْ عِبَادِنَا الْمُخْلَصِينَ. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, when he decides to protect his servants, he protects them. So what happens is they both race towards the door, because now Yusuf alayhi salam, he's in a tough situation and he wants to get out of this situation, and he doesn't know what to do. So what's the first thing that occurs to his mind, or what's the first thing he decides to do, is he decides to run towards the locked door. Now, that locked door, he would have no access to opening that door. But he decides that if there's anything I can do, I'm just gonna run towards the door, because that's where I need to go out from, if I can get it to open. So what's the point here? He's doing the best he can do in order to stay away from the situation, and the situation is to fall into sin. So as he runs towards the door, there's no indication that he can get out. He's just running towards the door. What happens when they both run to the door? The door itself, the door opens, because from the outside, the high minister and the people from outside, they open the door. So Allah sets the situation in such a way that as he's running, he has no idea how this is going to open, but he has full tawakkul in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And as he's running, the door opens. And so right there, he's saved from the sin. One of the lessons here is that when we're in any situation, we have to do our best in order to fulfill what Allah wants from us. Perhaps we might not be able to do everything, but we have to do our best in order to show Allah that, Ya Allah, this is what I'm doing. This is what I can do. So help me with the rest. So this is what Yusuf alayhi salam was doing, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala helped him. So if there's a lesson here for us, it is that we have to do our best. We might not be able to see what's going to happen after this. When we do our best, it might seem like useless, because of the limitations that we have. But Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala sends from the unseen help that we would have never ever kind of imagined or thought about. So then what happens? Then there is from the people of the household, somebody says, hold on, or the wife says to the king, look, obviously she's kind of embarrassed. Look what he tried to do. What do you do to a person who tried to do evil with your wife? And she's addressing her husband. But then Yusuf alayhi salam, he says, it was she who tried to solicit me, to have me. So then there's a witness from the family that says, okay, you know what? let's analyze the situation. If the shirt is ripped, if his shirt is ripped from the back, then she's lying and he's telling the truth. If the shirt is ripped from the front, from his front, then she's telling the truth and he's lying. So it was just kind of like, let's figure out what are some of the indications that are there, and we can use those indications to come to a conclusion. So just, why would the shirt have been ripped? Perhaps he's running and she's trying to hold him, and the shirt rips, right? And it would have ripped from the front if the woman is trying to protect herself, and the man is facing her. So here they see that there's a rip from the back of Yusuf alayhi salam's shirt, and then it becomes manifest that it was she who was trying to seduce Yusuf alayhi salam. And the high minister, in recognizing this, is kind of obviously embarrassed as well, and says, he says to Yusuf alayhi salam, just turn away from this stuff. And he says to about the woman, indeed your cunning is great, right? And then he says to her, ask forgiveness for your sin. Indeed, you have been one of exceedingly sinful. Now, that's also interesting that they weren't Muslims. They weren't considering sin from a Islamic perspective, but they did have morals and ethics that they kind of stuck to. And from that perspective, they were she was in the wrong, and she kind of recognized that as well. And so and that's what he was kind of highlighting. So we'll talk about, that's the end of the theme there, but next class we'll continue talking about some of the important things here, which is related to patience. Now, there are different types of patience, and this whole story of Yusuf alayhi salam is related to patience and its different aspects. You have as-sabr anil ma'siyah, sabr alil ita'a, patience to stay away from sin, patience on doing good deeds, patience at the time of trials and tribulations. And patience at the time of trials and tribulations, you have no choice. You just have to accept it. Patience on sin, you do have a choice. You either fall into the sin or you stay away from it. And patience on ta'ah and doing good deeds, also you have a choice. Either you continue doing good deeds, no matter how difficult it is to wake up in the morning and pray, no matter how difficult it is to part from your wealth and give sadaqah and zakah, you still have a choice whether you do it or not. So there's different types of patience, and Yusuf alayhi salam, throughout the story, you notice that he's experiencing the different types of patience, not only him, but his family members as well, and also the different kind of people, characters that are mentioned throughout the story. They're also experiencing different types of trials and patience throughout their lives. So may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala give us the ability to understand and act upon what has been heard. Inshallah, we'll continue forward next lesson from where we left off. I did say last week that it'll be nice if people have a copy of the translation and the Quran. It's not a requirement, obviously. If you do, it's good. If you don't, it's fine. Just listening to it, inshallah, we'll all benefit from it as well. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala accept us. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala allow us to have istiqamah and take lessons from the Quran as we should. Jazakumullahu khairan. وآخر دعوانا الحمد لله رب العالمين والسلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته.